Ну хорошо, и что дальше? А нажито что? Да ничего не нажито. Понимаете? Ладно, ладно. Да, да. Ну ладно, да. Все нормально, все живут, да. Да. Себя надо двигать вперед, да. Что-то я тут много всего сделал. Да, люди, губы. Куда-то идете? Куда-то идете? Просто даже ради этой штучки. Деревня ты как-то все.
Let's talk about Grammarly. The digital writing assistant more than 20 million people use to connect their ideas to the world. Whether you realize...
It's been a good few years since I last dabbled with custom ROMs on my Android phones. Back in the glory days of the HTC Desire and some earlier Samsung Galaxy phones, Android was simple enough and open enough that many of us would think nothing of flashing new nightly builds from our favorite developers. These days though, Android phones are a lot more complex and a lot more locked down than they were in the early 2010s. NFC payments, secure banking apps, and emerging technology like mobile driving licenses and even passports means that for many of us, running a rooted device is just out of the question. Nevertheless, the Android hacking community is alive and well in 2021, and some enterprising developers are even helping us to run modern versions of Android on positively ancient hardware. Which brings me to this, the Samsung Galaxy S2. This is one of the oldest Android phones I have with me right now. The GS2 was released in 2011 and was one of the breakthrough Android devices credited with the platform's early success. These days though, the stock Galaxy S2 is not particularly useful. Officially, this European GS2 model was abandoned way back on Android 4.1 Jelly Bean, and while Jelly Bean is supported for some basic stuff like Google Play Protect and Google Play Services, outside of that, apps have long since moved on. As we saw in another video a few months back, using an S2 on this level of firmware in 2021 is basically a feature phone experience. So with a trusty micro USB cable, a fresh installation of the Odin flashing software, and a few handy zip files, I've set about bringing Android 11 to a phone which originally shipped all the way back on Android 2.3. The credit for getting Android 11 up and running on the S2 belongs to XDA members Renando and Chrono Monochrome, who posted their earliest builds in December of 2020 and are still keeping things up to date at the time this video is going out. For anyone who's tinkered with Android ROMs in the past, installation is pretty simple. The first step involves repartitioning the S2's internal storage and flashing a custom recovery, or in normal speak, rearranging the storage inside the Galaxy S2 in a way that Android 11 will actually fit on there. And then after that, installing the recovery software that'll actually help us flash this custom ROM. The next challenge was dealing with this phone's wonky USB port, which struggled to maintain a data connection. Not a great issue to be dealing with while monkeying with the phone's partition table over that cable, but my trusty S2 eventually soldiered through the process. And once that's done, the next step can be completed with the help of a trusty micro SD card, meaning that there's no need to connect a PC or any other device to the phone after this point. That is, of course, after wrestling with the phone's creaky, decade-old volume, home, and power keys to activate the key combination required to boot into recovery. It's a two-stage process involving first flashing the ROM itself, Lineage OS 18, as the latest incarnation of what used to be called CyanogenMod. Then afterwards we have the option to flash a few Google apps to make the phone a bit more useful. To check everything was up and running, I first powered on the phone just running barebones Lineage OS. Essentially, this is open source Android 11 compiled for this phone with a handful of very basic apps. Straight up Lineage OS on the S2 gives you the usual things like contacts, dialer, messages, alarms, music gallery, and a basic camera app, and really that is pretty much it. From there, Lineage is essentially a blank canvas. You can keep things simple, download and get started with a third-party app store, or flash one of the Google Apps packages that are available. But here's the thing, even doing basically nothing with only a handful of system apps in the app drawer, using Android 11 on the Galaxy S2 requires a good bit of patience. Scrolling is laggy, touch response in general, and typing in particular feels kludgy compared to any modern device. But if you think about it, that's not too surprising considering the S2 has less processing power than the average 2021 smartwatch. Even so, pretty much everything works, which is impressive in itself. The basic web browser happily loads pages from the bloated internet of 2021 without the annoying HTTPS errors that you get from the stock browser in the official Samsung firmware. The camera isn't going to win you any awards, but it can successfully take photos and even offers a few pro mode features that weren't in the last official ROM for this phone. Even handy conveniences that you'd never expect to see on a Galaxy S2, like screencasting and Wacom notification, are fully functional. The phone was even able to pick up 3G signal and use mobile data thanks to a spare mini SIM that I had lying around. After applying my GApps package of choice though, performance took a dive even further. That's kind of understandable given that it's now got Google Play services working away in the background, but after allowing a few minutes for it to get up to speed, I was eventually able to add my Google Workspace account and see how the current crop of Android apps works on this phone. And, well, they work, but once again, near saintly patience is required using an Android app designed for 2021 on hardware built for 2011, and that even includes basics like Gmail and Google Calendar. Consider yourself lucky if your scrolling speeds are able to surpass 30 frames per second, and YouTube videos are just about watchable in full screen mode, but even at lower resolutions I notice one or two dropped frames. Tapping on buttons or controls, well, in some cases you'll need to allow a second or two for the phone to respond. And as you'd expect from a phone with just a gigabyte of RAM, apps do get dumped out of memory pretty quickly, which can lead to even more frustration. But even with all these compromises, the Galaxy S2, updated 10 years on to Android 11, essentially works as advertised, albeit extremely slowly. And the developers deserve credit for somehow squeezing the current version of Android onto a device that falls well below its minimum specification. Is the Galaxy S2 actually any more usable on Android 11 compared to Ice Cream Sandwich or Jelly Bean? Probably not, considering the performance trade-off involved. And it's true that modern Android apps generally don't support these much older platform versions anyway, but you're trading compatibility for performance, and the trade-offs in either direction are pretty extreme. Nevertheless, it's impressive that this fusion of new software and old hardware is even possible, and perhaps in another decade the Galaxy S21 Ultra on my desk right now might find new life on, say, Android 22 with the help of that same community. That's it for now. Let us know what you think of this blast from the past down in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Liebe Anlegerinnen und Anleger, Sie mögen dynamische Aktiengewinne, Sie schätzen echte Innovation, Sie lieben es, bei einer Durchbruchstechnologie von Anfang an dabei zu sein, dann hat
What enabled smartphones to dominate as a technology, to be so prolific and critical to our lives that I would rather lose my car keys or wallet than my smartphone? The answer to this question isn't a simple one-liner, but rather it's a combination of answers. App development, wireless internet, carrier networks, Steve Jobs' brilliant marketing, though I would argue the most important contributor was the seamless combination of different functions and technologies into a single package. In this episode, we're going to explore the most distinctive feature of the smartphone's merging of technologies, the touchscreen display. There are three technologies in the touchscreen display. These technologies are combined all on top of each other. When you felt and used a smartphone for the first time, you just knew that you were holding something revolutionary, something different from all previous phones. These were not new technologies. Many devices used a tactile interface, and color displays had already been the standard for most phones. Even toughened glass had been discovered in the 1800s. But the innovative element was combining them seamlessly, one layer on top of another like magic. Okay, so let's get into the layers of a touchscreen display. On the top we have the protective glass. A lot of us have had a screen shatter, but think about how many times you've dropped it and it hasn't. That's because a smartphone's glass is over 5 times stronger than normal glass. And before the first iPhone showed up in 2007, the standard for cell phone screens was plastic. And although plastic doesn't shatter, it is very easily scratched. If the screen were covered in plastic, it wouldn't last a week sitting in your pocket next to your keys before having dozens of scratches all over it. So what makes toughened glass so much stronger? A smartphone's glass is an aluminosilicate glass that is toughened by soaking it in a bath of potassium nitrate. This causes the sodium atom by soaking it in a bath. A smartphone's glass is an aluminosilicate glass that is toughened by soaking it in a bath of potassium nitrate. This causes the sodium atoms in the glass to migrate out, and much larger potassium atoms to take their place. Because the potassium atoms are much larger, they generate a substantial compressive force on the surface of the glass. Here's a quick analogy. Imagine filling the backseat of a car with 3 average-sized people. They fit snugly, but if you push them, they're still able to move. Now replace those 3 people with 3 football linebackers. Those linebackers are just flat out stuck, unable to move. It would take much more force to move those linebackers from their seats. This is the fundamental concept behind what makes toughened glass special. The atoms are compressed, so it would take much more force for the glass to break.
Ты не должен делать все сам, делегируй. Сосредоточься на главном, делегируй. Твои дела важнее всего. Делегируй. Управляй кончиками пальцев. Делегируй. Фокусируйся на главном, остальное делегируй. Делегируй интеллектуальным ассистентам Volkswagen Touareg с пакетом IQ Drive Plus.
Volkswagen.
Что мне это даст?
Below the toughened glass is a projected capacitive touchscreen that senses the presence and location of conductive materials such as your fingertip. This touchscreen is composed of two transparent diamond grid patterns printed on polyester with an optically clear insulator in the middle. The diamond grid pattern is printed with a transparent material called indium tin oxide, or ITO, which acts as a conductor composed and allow the toughened glass to break. Below the toughened glass is a projected capacitive touchscreen that senses the presence and location of conductive materials such as your fingertip. This touchscreen is composed of two transparent diamond grid patterns printed on polyester with an optically clear insulator in the middle. The diamond grid pattern is printed with a transparent material called indium tin oxide, or ITO, which acts as a conductor. Let's take a closer look on how it works. Say we build a bunch of electrons on this blue diamond. However, because there is an insulator in the way, the electrons cannot move. The electrons generate a negative electric field, which causes a bunch of positive charges to build up on the yellow diamond. This is called a capacitor. Now, when we move a conductive material such as
Флип.
potassium nitrate,
Бадалпазай.
this causes
Вот
the
это
sodium
залпазай.
atoms in the glass to
Драшин,
migrate out,
русским
and
языком.
much larger potassium atoms to take their place. Because the potassium atoms are much larger, they generate a substantial compressive force on the surface of the glass. Here's a quick analogy. Imagine filling the backseat of a car with 3 average-sized people. They fit snugly, but if you push them, they're still able to move. Now replace those 3 people with 3 football linebackers. Those linebackers are just flat out stuck, unable to move. It would take much more force to move those linebackers from their seats. This is the fundamental concept behind what makes toughened glass special. The atoms are compressed, so it would take much more force for the glass to break. Below the toughened glass is a projected capacitive touchscreen that senses the presence and location of conductive materials such as your fingertip. This touchscreen is composed of two transparent diamond grid patterns printed on polyester with an optically clear insulator in the middle. The diamond grid pattern is printed with a transparent material called indium tin oxide, or ITO, which acts as a conductor. Let's take a closer look on how it works. Say we build a bunch of electrons on this blue diamond. However, because there is an insulator in the way, the electrons cannot move. The electrons generate screen is composed of two transparent diamond grid patterns printed on polyester with an optically clear insulator in the middle. The atoms are compressed, fundamental concept, but much more force for the glass to break. Below the toughened glass is a projected capacitive touchscreen that senses the presence and location of conductive materials such as your fingertip. This touchscreen is composed of two transparent diamond grid patterns printed on polyester with an optically clear insulator in the middle. The diamond grid pattern is printed with a transparent material called indium tin oxide, or ITO, which acts as a conductor. Let's take a closer look on how it works. Say we build a bunch of electrons on this blue diamond. However, because there is an insulator in the way, the electrons cannot move. The electrons generate a negative electric field, which causes a bunch of positive charges to build up on the yellow diamond. This is called a capacitor. Now when we move a conductive material such as the tip of your finger close to this capacitor, it disrupts the electric field, which changes the amount of positive charges that build up on the yellow diamond. The change in positive charges on the yellow diamond is measured, and the processor registers this as a touch. The location of the touch is detected by scanning the charges or voltage along the blue diamonds while actively measuring each yellow diamond column. Note that each row of blue diamonds is connected together. Also, each column of yellow diamonds is connected. This setup makes a grid of blue columns and yellow rows. Just to clarify again, all of these components are made with transparent materials. Measuring each point requires too much circuitry, so we only measure each column. The charge or voltage gets sent to each row in quick succession, so the processor can register multiple touches at once. Below that is a display which uses LCD or OLED technology. While the LCD and the OLED display both produce high-quality images, in this episode we are going to focus on the OLED technology as it is the standard in most new smartphones. OLED stands for Organic Light Emitting Diode. This high resolution stands for Organic Light Emitting Diode. This high-resolution OLED display is what generates the high-quality images that we see whenever we look at our smartphone. This is a crazy intricate grid. Current 2018 high-end phones can have over 3.3 million pixels. That means there are 10 million microscopic, individually controlled, dimmable, red, green, and blue lights in the palm of your hand. Take a moment and think about the engineering level required to control, let alone design and manufacture, that many microscopic lights. OLED displays are composed of a massive grid of individual pixels, and in each pixel is a red, green, and blue subpixel. Each subpixel's light intensity is controlled by a small thin film transistor that acts as a dimmer switch. There are many layered structures in each subpixel. However, explaining the small thin film transistor that acts as a dimmer switch. There are many layered structures in each subpixel. However, explaining the function of each layer will have to be saved for a future episode. Photons are produced in the subpixel by electrons that are driven from the negative to the positive terminal. When they pass through this middle layer here, called the emissive layer, photons are emitted through a release of energy. The compounds used to make up the emissive layer determines the color of the light emitted, and the intensity of this light is dependent on how many electrons pass through. This explanation is greatly simplified, but the research, engineering, and science behind OLEDs is extensive. In fact, research has the light emitted. The compounds used to make up the emissive layer determines the color of the light through. This OLEDs was awarded to 3 researchers for their discovery of efficient blue light-emitting diodes. So let's summarize. On the bottom is an OLED display composed of up to 10 million little colored lights. On top of that is a transparent projected capacitive touchscreen that can sense one or multiple touches at a time. And on top of that is strengthened glass that protects your screen from scratches and most falls. Now you too are a touchscreen expert. If you have any further questions, post them in the comments below. Subscribe, like, and tell your friends and family about something you learned. This episode details the structure of a touchscreen display. Branches from this episode are multi-touch design, electric fields, capacitors, OLEDs and their control, LCDs, wire materials transparent, and interface aesthetics.
Вот здесь.
Государство, которое систематически врет своим гражданам и
Ой,
нарушает
блин.
их права.
Я вообще
миллионов
делать не
разных
могу, у меня
способов.
немножко, ну это немножко
Такого,
лукавство,
что-
да, понятно. Где там, да, понимаешь меня, там везде, да. То есть я сразу вижу как бы слабаков, которые вот люди, которые в государстве, они такие, ну не столько все должно, они такой нехорошо, я такой нормальный, и все у нас. И такие хорошие, тут, как хренососы, сосунки, понимаешь, это не мужское, да. То есть я понимаю, многодетная мать и то баба. Баба, успокойся, иди вон, мужика уткнись, пусть он у тебя будет герой, пусть тебя защитит что-нибудь, да пусть он решит, что тебя защищать не надо, например, или что, он же твой мужик-то. Ну да, понимаю, да. Ну, так у него голова, потому что, а у тебя да, больше, да, ну понимаешь, короче, твои права, ну, что тебе надо-то еще? Да, будешь добрее, будет защищать тебя. Будет что защищать, будет защищать, значит. Ну, нету, значит, нету, да. Сколько не тебе решать, да, понимаю, да. И это нормально, намного нормальнее, чем то, что тебе кажется, что хорошо, блин. Да, откуда это мнение, то, что это хорошо, да, понимаешь. Да, да. Так это хорошо, понимаешь, это даже это здорово, да, да, понимаешь. Но он потерялся, говорит, да. Ну да. Ну ладно, что он сейчас скажет? Он...
Государству я был бы против принудительной вакцинации, потому что это был бы еще один инструмент.
Ой, едят тебя налево, блин, вообще просто... Как бы вечно, типа, вот будешь на это жизнь свою тратить. Мне столько всего должны. И мне столько должны сегодня дают. Бесплатный Путин, где ты там, ну-ка, давайте поменяйте Путина, он не бесплатный уже. Он такой, понимаешь, потреблять, короче, да, понимаешь, бесплатно, да, да. Ну, как бы ты понимаешь, потому что, да, короче, да. Я понял, что... Ну, я... Ладно, ладно, я понял. Ну это не я же так говорил, я не знаю, это чья мудрость, столько на это, не знаю. Не суть разговора, я просто говорю, что, да. Я лично, ты меня если спросишь, я тебе скажу, что эти дела, это не дела, это как бы антидела. То есть это, да, теневой бизнес по того, да. Дела это бизнес, вот дела, которые что-то производят, что-то там делают, понимаешь. А политика, она везде замешалась, и она в чистом виде вылезла вот в это вот и все. Который, да, понимаешь, да. Ну да, да, да. Ну, это как бы просто тебе не надо туда отклоняться, по большому счету, вообще как бы, да, понимаешь. Там нечего делать просто, там ничего не, да, понимаешь, да. Ну и что теперь, ну, не знаю, думайте сами. Это опять же мое мнение. Вы можете как бы делать, еще и книги писать бесплатно, причем, вы же получаете зарплату, да, бла-бла-бла, короче, неважно, поехали.
Who's a ghost? An autonomous chessboard that moves completely on its own accord, or a bottle of water that can make your brain think you're drinking whatever you want to be drinking. Welcome to 24 of the hottest tech inventions.